My name is Jack of all states, and welcome to my second YouTube video ever. Thank you to everybody who watched my first video on the world's friendliest people in Palau. Thank you for the love, the comments, the subscribes, the criticisms, all of that stuff. Like I said in my first video, this is partially a passion project. Hopefully my kids can see one day. And this is partially just to see what happens on YouTube. I really love talking about geography, history, countries, oddities about this wonderful and grand world that we live in. So thank you for tuning in. We're gonna be talking about Timor-Leste, AKA East Timor tonight. Let's do the rundown. In this video, we're gonna go over the lovely country of Timor-Leste. I'm gonna be talking about some things that I think you guys should know, some of my favorite things about Timor-Leste, also gonna tap into my experiences in this country, and the whole point of the rundown is I get to choose a country, a place, or just an oddity of this world, and we get to go over it together. But first things first, we're not gonna get started until we do a little bit of background. Timor-Leste is located in the southeastern region of Southeast Asia, but it's within Indonesia, and it's in the southeast region of Indonesia as well. I'll put it up on a map for you guys so that you can see. As you can see in this map, it's pretty small. It is the eastern side of the island of Timor, which is shared between East Timor and Indonesia. And quick caveat for the rest of this video, I'm going to be referring to East Timor and Timor-Leste interchangeably. They are the same country. One is just its anglicized name, and the other one is its name derived when it was a Portuguese colony. For such a small country, Timor-Leste has a pretty sizable population of 1.3 million, and its capital is Dili, which was also the capital of the Portuguese colony when the Portuguese ruled Timor-Leste. There's also a really interesting enclave that Timor-Leste owns, which is surrounded by the Indonesian side of Timor. It's kind of funny because this part of East Timor is on the west side of the island, and it's the westernmost part of East Timor. It's a whole thing, but it's called, I think, Okisi. I'm not Portuguese, I'm not East Timorese either, so apologies for my pronunciation. But it is surrounded by the Indonesian part of the island, while the rest is on the other side. Timor-Leste is also the least visited country in all of Southeast Asia and one of the least visited in the entire world. In fact, some of you that are watching this, right, probably were born when this thing wasn't even its own independent country. Well, before we get to the modern age, let's start way back in the beginning. Timor-Leste has been inhabited by humans for a long, long time. In fact, some of the oldest human remains in the entire Austronesian region are found in a cave called Lily Cave in Timor-Leste, and it's helped a lot of anthropologists figure out how humans actually first migrated into Australia from Southeast Asia. But anyway, back to Timor-Leste is and who owns it. In the colonial age, Timor-Leste was a Portuguese colony, which is interesting because everywhere around it basically, with the exception of Australia to the south, was a Dutch colony in the Dutch East Indies. And the fact that Timor-Leste was a Portuguese colony and the rest of the Dutch East Indies were a Dutch colony will have big repercussions into why Timor-Leste is its own country today, and it also has very important repercussions for how their culture developed and their own self-identity, but also some of the conflict that's happened on the island. For the first section of this video, we're going to be talking about Mount Ramelau, also called Tatamailau. It is the highest point in all of Timor-Leste, and they say it is where the spirits of East Timor's people go when they pass away. Mount Ramelau is just under 3,000 feet tall, and it is the highest point in all of Timor-Leste. Now, the mountain itself is only 43 miles south of the capital of Dili. However, due to the conditions of the roads in Timor-Leste and the vehicles available, it's gonna take you like 4 or 5 hours, probably a little bit longer if there has been rain or any accidents on the road, not to mention cow that just like to walk across it. Now, to get to Mount Ramelau, you first start in Dili, and I think that there are buses that can take you from Dili down to a town called Hatto Buliko, which is the closest town before you actually start to summit Mount Ramelau, or you can get a private driver, somebody that can help you figure out your tour and your stay in Timor-Leste. I went the route of hiring a private driver. He was amazing, the friendliest guy in the entire world, and he took care of us from Dili on the way to Mount Ramelau, and I'd be happy to give you guys this information if anybody's interested. So before you climb Mount Ramelau, you have to stay in Hato Buliko. And Hato Buliko is a town high up in the mountains. It is shrouded in clouds, and there is very little electricity or running water. And while that may seem a little bit scary, the sense of community that they have there is unlike anywhere else in the world. They all look out for each other, even though they do not have the same access to amenities as we might in a more developed nation. They still cook some bomb food. But the very best part of this is the stars. Never in my life have I seen stars brighter and more clear than when I was in Hato Buliko and Mount Ramelau. I mean, just take a look at these pictures. They are amazing. You can just feel the universe smiling upon you when you do this hike. So to hike Mount Ramelau, you're gonna start early in the morning at 2 or 3 a.m. and the hike is going to take you about 4 hours. Guys, I am not gonna lie, this hike kicked my butt. It was so hard. I thought I was 20,000 feet up in the air and I was like less than 3,000. It was insane. What's crazy is the temperature difference from the base of the mountain, which is relatively hot. I mean, you're in a jungle, right? And you get to the top and it's actually freezing cold. The wind chill is insane. You feel like you are gonna become an icicle on top of the mountain. But once you get to the top of the mountain, you are greeted with maybe the most amazing view a human can possibly experience. You get to meet the Virgin Mary on top of the mountain. Timor-Leste is a Catholic country, so there's lots of iconography to commemorate the saints and Jesus and Mary and a lot of religious figures within Catholicism. And I mean, just look at the view. It is insane. I'm very well traveled. I have the fortune of having gone to lots of different countries, and never have I seen anything like this view that I saw on top of Mount Ramelau.
But they say that Mount Ramelau is haunted by spirits of the deceased.
Yeah, that's right. So basically they say that once somebody dies in this area, their spirit kind of stays on Mount Ramelau and they can come and interact with the living on this mountain. It's creepy. And I even talked to some Timor-Leste locals who said that they had had their own personal encounters with spirits. I met somebody who said that he took this hike early in the morning by himself because he wanted to clear his head, and he had hiked all the way up on top of the mountain, and he was met with that super cold wind chill that I was talking about before. And he's on the top of this mountain and he had expended so much energy, he did not have the energy to come down the mountain, and he said that he prayed to God for somebody to save him. Lo and behold, as he's closing his eyes and praying aloud, a man walks over and makes a fire out of the shrubs on top of the mountain. Now, according to the guy who I talked to, this mystery man who made the fire never spoke to him, but he gave his jacket off of his back to the man who was cold. And he went back down the mountain without ever saying a word. Now, the guy who was cold by the fire, he eventually warmed up and he wanted to go down the mountain and thank this man who had saved him on top of the mountain. But when he walked down the mountain back to the parking lot, there was no trace of the man. And the guy who I talked to attributes his experience to divine intervention. The second topic that we're gonna be talking about today is the Timorese War for Independence, the UN mission that was in Timor-Leste, and the Indonesian occupation before it became its own independent country. The Timor-Leste War of Independence was a conflict that raged on the island of Timor-Leste from 1975, I believe, until 1999. So as I mentioned earlier, Timor-Leste used to be a Portuguese colony, and in 1974, the Portuguese gave a lot of their colonies autonomy in something called the Carnation Revolution. Now, as Portugal pulled out, there were two main parties vying for power in Timor-Leste, UDT and Fretilin. Fretilin eventually gained control, but Suharto, who was Indonesia's president at the time in 1975, thought that Fretilin, which was communist affiliated, was a threat to Indonesia. And Indonesia had just been through a massive internal struggle and a genocide that killed 1 million plus people, and basically the anti-communist forces had won. So Indonesia sees a country in the east looking like they want to be independent, and oh, whoa, they're communists. Oh, that's bad. Like, take guns, boom, 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 shoot them. So basically, Indonesia invades Timor-Leste, and it starts a very bloody conflict. A lot of people from Timor-Leste rose up against the Indonesian invaders, but there were some absolute atrocities that happened during this war. The Dili massacre is one of them, in which a bunch of protesters, particularly young Timor-Lesteans, were murdered in cold blood by Indonesian forces in a graveyard. And there are even stories of Indonesian forces using helicopters that were painted with the Red Cross that were secretly attack helicopters, and they just decimated Timor-Leste rebels. And what sucks is that the Western world and a lot of other people who had a lot of money and influence and political power just kind of turned a blind eye to this entire conflict, right? Timor-Leste was seen as communist, Indonesia was seen as anti-communist, and basically the entire anti-communist world was just kind of like, oh, I'm not gonna look there because they're not communists and they're killing communists. Anyway, due to some pretty powerful journalism, especially by Australian journalists, people started to take notice of this conflict, and in 1999, the UN intervened and established a peacekeeping mission there. And in the wake of this peacekeeping mission, Timor-Leste emerged as an independent country in 2002, becoming the first new country of the 2000s. Guys, I hope you are hungry, because this third section, we're gonna be talking about salted corn and vanilla. All right, guys, I know you might not believe me, but I swear to God, maybe the most delicious snack that was also just super basic was this salted corn that I had in Timor-Leste. So I'm gonna put this picture up here in the video, and as you can see, guys, there is a plate with a bunch of, I don't even know what they are, I think they're corn kernels, right? And all these guys did was put salt on them. I swear to God, I asked them, I cannot speak Tetum, so I'm not sure if the translation was correct, but I'm pretty sure all these guys did was like heat up corn in a pot and throw some salt on them. Oh my God, the most delicious snack I've ever had. I could not put it down, and all these Timor-Lesteans were just laughing at me. So that was like maybe the best snack I've ever had, but I'm also gonna talk about one of Timor-Leste's biggest exports, which is vanilla. Vanilla grows extremely well in the climate on Timor-Leste, and there are a lot of farmers that farm vanilla. This vanilla right here, I hope you can see, is from Dili Vanilli. It's vanilla extract, and it was grown, cultivated, packaged, processed, all by a family of vanilla and coffee growers just a little bit south of Dili, in between Mount Ramelau and Dili. Another cool thing, what these farmers told me, is that Timor-Leste is just so fertile that you can basically eat a fruit, and believe me, there are a lot of them over there, a lot of fruits that you've never heard of here in America, and just toss it in the bushes and a whole tree will grow. It's awesome. For section number 4, we're gonna be talking about why if Timor-Leste was a person, they would not be able to buy alcohol, they would not be able to drive a car, they would not be able to rent a hotel room, because this country is one of the youngest in the entire world. So Timor-Leste is insane for many reasons, but one of them is that their population, I think like 40% of it, they're under 15 years old, which is just ridiculous if you think about it for a second. I mean, that is almost half of your entire population. Like, as a freshman in high school, for all my Americans watching, it's nuts. 20 is the median age in this country, and I think the average amount of people for a family is 5.3. And it's cool because there are kids like everywhere you go in Timor-Leste. If you're like driving on the road, there are just packs and packs of them walking on the road. And what's cool about people from this area of the world is that they possess a gene, not all of them, but some of them, that when they are little, they have blonde hair, like naturally occurring blonde hair. And it's more prevalent in places like the island of Papua New Guinea, and some of the like Western Pacific islands. But it also shows up a little bit here in Timor-Leste too. Now, another thing about these kids is they're super smart because they know Tetum, which is the national language of Timor-Leste. They also probably know a little bit of Portuguese. They know whatever regional language they grew up speaking in their little town. Bahasa Indonesia from their parents, who probably learned to speak it when it was part of Indonesia, or English. They're great. There are also some absolute ballers here, as you can see in this video. I mean, these kids are studs. They all know who Ramelau is because Timor-Leste, being a former colony of Portugal, they have associations with Portugal. I think that Ramelau actually visited Timor-Leste one year, so there are pictures of him like all over Dili. It's super, super cool. And one more cool thing that I noticed is that all these kids look extremely different than me. They can't speak the same language as me, but it was so easy to communicate with these kids through like the simple act of kicking a soccer ball, right? Or smiling or laughing. And it's experiences like these that just go to show that we are all human. And even though we might not be able to speak the same language and always understand each other, we can still connect with one another. And it's a really heartwarming feeling. For our 5th and final section, we're gonna be talking about how Timor-Leste's relationship with Catholicism uniquely contributes to their cultural identities. I got to go to a mass in Timor-Leste, and I kid you not, damn near everybody in that church was singing. And they weren't just like, glory. No, it was, hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn king. Except it was way better. They were loads more talented than I am. And it was loud. It was loud. They sounded beautiful. And I personally have an appreciation for this because I grew up going to mass. But even somebody who isn't religious can still appreciate this wonderful chorus of people. And I really wish I had a video of it, but I don't. But trust me, it was angelic. Now, from what I saw in Timor-Leste, people take their Catholicism very seriously. And you don't believe me? Bet you didn't know they have the second biggest statue of Jesus in the whole entire world. Yeah! Look at this thing, man. This thing is massive. Oh my God. It is second only to, yep, you guessed it, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But this is crazy. I mean, who would have thought that Timor-Leste would have the second biggest statue of Jesus? You would have thought the Vatican would have had it. I mean, Pope Francis, come on, man. Pick up your game. And it is on like a little hill, and it overlooks the harbor, and Christ's arms are out, watching the harbor, watching the ships come in and go out. And it's also like a nice little hike up from the base to the top. And something I noticed were people in Timor-Leste were very active. There were a lot of young people, as I mentioned, who were just running up and down this hill, sweating, smiling, feeling good. Another really cool thing to see was this church on top of this hill on the way to Hatobuluco, Mount Ramelau, and it looks like a Disney castle. I mean, no cooler church in the world. Again, Pope Francis, pick up your game. And with that, we are done with our second video. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, I would really appreciate it if you liked the video. Subscribe if you want to. Leave a comment. Like I said, this is my second ever YouTube video. Passion project. Also want to do it for entertainment. Also just want to challenge myself in this new year. But I wish all my viewers a happy 2025. Health, happiness, good luck, good fortune to you guys. And I'll see you next time on The Rundown. Jack of all states, out!